So one of my first jobs, I was working in a warehouse at an appliance store, and they had hired a temporary service to get some additional help. And I remember one of the men who was African American that came back from a delivery, and he was so excited because he had never been on the expressway. This guy was 25, 24 years old, had never seen farm animals. They made a delivery out to Swanton. It was just, and as a dumb young person who just wasn't aware,
right.
I just looked at that and thought, how could that be? How could you not know what a cow looks like? How could you have never seen a cow? And then I started thinking, well, has he even never been to the zoo? I mean, the zoo is right here in the middle of town for everybody, but it costs money, and it may not be as accessible to some people.
And you have to get there.
And you have to get there.
Yeah, you have to get there. So that's all part of it. Mm-hmm. That really, really is. It's when you like I said, part of the passion that drove us to do this documentary. Mm-hmm. We want to help people understand that this just didn't happen. Mm-hmm. This wasn't a series of individual choices.
Right.
It wasn't just like one bank who decided to redline. Right. It wasn't because some builder came along and said, I'm going to build an all-white, subdivision. Right. This was from the government. Mm-hmm. It was systemic, and it was across the board. And helping people understand that is really important, I think, from the standpoint of when we went to go do this documentary. We were in the middle of a pandemic. We had applied for a grant from HUD and received the grant to do the documentary. And we had the 45th administration who had their views. And so we were in, this whole situation of how do we do this now?
Right.
And whatnot. And through the creativity of Will Lucas at Credia, we were able to accomplish it. And the individuals who we interviewed, it was a blessing because they were available because they were in a pandemic too, who are normally, we might not have gotten them. Right. So that was the blessing in creating it. But that's the whole intention of creating this documentary, is to really help and educate people as to the how and the why we got to where we're at, because it becomes fixable. I think Tiff Emanuel says it best. She says, we have successful neighborhoods, so we know how to build successful neighborhoods. Right. We just have to circle back and create those successes within communities that are urban that have been disinvested in.
Right. So I wrote a ton of notes, so forgive me for referring to these things.
Oh, no, absolutely. I'm honored. I'm pleased. I'm so glad that you've done that. That's fantastic.
So a couple of things that I wrote down as I had gone through the video, I think for probably the third time, I wrote down 4 things. Education, awareness, accessibility, communication were things that came to mind that I either got from the video directly or just what I felt was needed. So let's talk about education for a second. What can we do within the school systems to be able to make improvements? Because people don't become, for lack of a better word, evil, just all on their own. It's brought upon them. People bring it into their lives. Something happens. Several things happen. So from an educational standpoint with our children, where do we make changes there that can help bring them to a point when they're adults that they are inclusive and they are aware?
I think it starts with, and again, this is just my humble opinion. Sure. There are experts who may disagree with me, but I think it's, first of all, we have to deliver the right education. Mm-hmm. My passion for civil rights started when I was 13 years old. And I grew up in a household, we're immigrants to this country, so we didn't grow up knowing about the Civil War. Mm-hmm. I didn't grow up with racism at all. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was interesting because at 13, I'm watching the Civil War movie and they're talking about slavery and they're showing these slaves and chains. I became hysterical watching this movie because I hadn't seen that kind of violence against a human being. Mm-hmm. So what has to happen is we need to tell the truth. We need to tell in our education system so that it's not a white or black thing. It's institutional. This was an institutional decision that was been made, these segregated living patterns, right?
Right.
And we need to, I don't want to say depersonalize it, but we need to get that set straight so that people understand that this just wasn't created overnight. There was an intention for this creation. And that's part of the reason why zip code matters. You know, I would love to see this documentary shown in schools so that people can wrap their brain around it.
Sure.
Like, okay, we
Create
can
the
fix
awareness.
this. Yeah, you know, and starting it at a really young age and using the opportunity of schools, the time that children are in schools, to really help them understand that this is not the way it has to be.
Right.
That they can make a difference in the choices that they make.
Right.
And bringing them along that way. I think once we start addressing the truth in the educational system, and not just as, oh, this is something that happened.
Yeah. Past tense, happened. Which brings me to my next question is, this still happens today. If I'm not mistaken, not too long ago, I remember attending a meeting at the Fair Housing Center, and it might have been a year-end meeting where they talked about a lender that was still practicing this.
Yes.
In this day and age, after 2000, we still have people that were practicing this.
Yes, yes.
So it's amazing because I think there's a large group of people that hear about these things and they think, well, I don't see that happening. I don't hear it happening, so it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And in actuality, it is still going on in some cases.
Yes, it is. It's still going on, you know, and redlining is still happening, both by, it happens by appraisers when they go in and they appraise, you know, a property. If statistics show that it's, you know, and I don't have those statistics off the top of my head, but I just attended a workshop put on by the National Fair Housing Association that helped us understand how we have to keep our eye on appraisers, because what they're doing is they're appraising households that are owned by Black owners at a lesser value in a neighborhood than the counterpart. Insurance companies, redline, and as well as lending institutions. So we've got those three components we have to keep our eye on. And I think a lot of it has to do with education. I believe the more we educate people about their biases and become aware of their own biases, the easier it will become to address, because I don't think anybody wakes up every day going, I'm going to make life tougher, I'm going to do this. They're just so unaware of their own indoctrination, their own biases, that they don't see how it bleeds into